Hey, what's up guys? JB here. So over on the Japanese side, they have been having a non-Final Fantasy related collaboration with Dragon Quest Tact. And that has characters from throughout the Dragon Quest games. They have been doing something interesting with this collaboration, and they've actually given a couple of famous villains from the series their own unit. And we're going to be looking at Zoma today of Dragon Quest III fame. Now, I personally haven't played that one. I do know that it is one of the most well-revered in the series, but I do like Dragon Quest in general. I think all of the games in that series have a very familiar feeling, and that is definitely one of the draws to it. When I was very young, actually one of the first games that I got from my Nintendo system was a game called Dragon Warrior, which was the title here in the US for Dragon Quest 1. I really didn't understand what I was doing at all in that game, and unbeknownst to me, it was actually my first foray into the RPG genre. I had absolutely no clue what was going on in the game, and it was definitely a very frustrating experience for me as a very young boy at the time. But eventually, I figured it out and I was able to finish the game, and it actually became one of my favorite games for that system at the time, and it definitely holds a very special place in my heart. Now, Dragon Quest is a hugely popular series in Japan, and definitely one of the most popular franchises of all time there. And although it has its fans, it has never really caught on the same way in the global market. So I do wonder, just a little bit, will we actually see this collaboration here on the global side? There have actually been several collaborations within FFBE that actually never made it to global. So far, that actually hasn't been the case, in War of the Visions, but I guess we'll just have to see here in a few months if they actually end up bringing this over. I do actually hope that they do bring it. It has some interesting characters, and like I said, these are actually some villains, which has been pretty rare to see in the game. So that aside, let's dig into our first preview of the collaboration here, and we're going to be looking at Zoma. He is a new 90-cost Ice Mage, so let's get into it and let's see what he can do. Now, starting with Zoma's TMR, I am not crazy, with the base stats on this item. Definitely not very exciting for an accessory, but it does have, a pretty decent HP value on it, admittedly. Other than that, it is kind of whatever. The effect on it is decent enough, but it is actually pretty niche, I'd say. I think the most notable thing about this item is that it provides a way to buff your strike resistance, which we really haven't seen very much of in the game, and I think it is notable for that reason. Now, moving into Zoma's stats here, the one standout I would say is his magic value. He's definitely among the top there, in both his base and innate values. Now, like units that we've seen with similar magic numbers in the past, Dark Fina for example, we'll see in a few minutes that he doesn't have any way to further boost this up in his passives. So that is what sort of balances out this high raw magic value here. That said, any sort of magic up boost will scale very nicely for him. Staying with the positives here on his stats, very nice HP and luck values for a mage, and definitely on the higher end, in terms of a caster style unit. That luck value in particular is very good, and it's actually a similar number to what Sakura has today. Now, moving on to the negatives here in terms of his stats, this is definitely one of the lowest dex values for both base and innate that we've ever seen in the game. In fact, other than Ayaka, it's actually the lowest dex total in War of the Visions. So what does it actually mean for this unit, having such a low dex? It's actually not all that great, because dex actually does factor in a pretty decent amount into the scaling of his magical attacks. And of course, as we know with any unit, dex factors into both your accuracy and crit values as well. Now, speaking of accuracy, that higher end luck that we were just talking about, it does help him out there, substantially. But since Zoma doesn't actually have any accuracy-based passives, his total innate accuracy actually ends up below average as well. So that's certainly going to be an issue and a concern for him. Evade units do have the potential to really abuse this unit if you haven't built up your accuracy substantially. Now, touching real quickly on his mastery ability here, you can see it's very simple. He's just getting a boost to his magic value. That's a 25% boost there, and that is factored into that innate value that we were just looking at in the stats. So definitely a bare bones mastery here. I would have liked to have seen maybe some magic resist penetration, maybe some spirit penetration would have been nice as well, but maybe that's something that they're saving for a future mastery too. Now, moving into the defensive numbers here, 0 defense and 4 spirit for Zoma. His damage resistances, though, are actually pretty decent. He's getting 10% to slash and magic, and then he's getting 15% to missile damage. So as I always say, it's a nice spot to be when you're resistant to the 3 primary damage types in the game. He does have a weakness to pierce here, but it's actually not too bad. It is just at -5. And then here, as we've seen, with most units in the game, he does have a innate weakness to strike damage. Now looking at the ailment resists here, he does get a 50% resist to stop, which is very nice. You know, that is an ailment that has seen a resurgence in the game and is going to continue to in the future. So I always like to see that innately on any unit. Alright, moving into Zoma's support abilities and counters. Starting off, he has a pretty insane passive here, which is going to give him 12% HP, 40 spirit penetration, and it's also giving him an auto heal back ability when he goes below 50%, and that's going to work one time per battle. And that's a mechanic that we should be familiar with here on Global. It's something that Leela the Bold has, and it's actually a little bit better than hers, you know, because this one is actually always on. It's a passive that he has equipped. This one just has a different HP threshold that it will trigger on. It's at that 50% rather than the 20%. I think that's actually good in the case of Zoma. You know, he's a squishier unit, and he actually doesn't have Immortal Spirit to fall back on. The other nice thing about this ability is that if he were to have re-raise on and he were to actually die in battle, when he comes back, it actually auto-triggers and it will heal him back up right then and there, which is very, very cool. So that's actually a tactic that I've seen many players on the Japanese side using. They've been utilizing Rairyu's TMR for that, and it's been actually pretty effective. So like I said, this is definitely, I would say, his best passive, you know, clearly, and I think you would have it on in all situations. Now, aside from that, I think there are several interesting choices here that you could add on to that. For sort of an all-purpose build to bring in a little bit of bulk, you could look at this 15 defense and spirit passive, which is number 2 here that he picks up from his devout subjob. It actually does lower his offensive potency a little bit, which may not be ideal. But you know, since he is lacking that innate defense and spirit numbers, you know, it could actually be useful to have. I think another option would be option number 3 here, and that's going to give him some additional mobility in the form of +1 jump. And this one will definitely be map dependent. You know, having that jump available to you can sometimes allow you to change your movement up a little bit, maybe get in a buff that you wouldn't be able to normally. So always nice to have that sort of flexibility, you know, built right into his kit. Now this one actually does come with a resistance buff, which does last for 3 turns. I'm definitely not too crazy about these 3-turn buffs, you know, just because, like I say, you know, you're generally having a 2-phase buffing cycle on most maps. So by the time you're actually getting into battle where these resistances would be relevant, you know, you're actually only getting maybe 1 turn of use out of that per battle. So I think in the case of Zoma, where he does have many other interesting passives available to him, you know, it may not be like an auto pick, you know, in most scenarios. It certainly could be useful though on maybe a smaller map where you're getting into the engagement with the enemy, you know, very, very quickly. Now in general, I think that Zoma has a lot of good passive abilities here to look at, but I think my personal favorite would be option number 5, and that is Emerald Echo that he's picking up from his Green Mage subjob. Now as we'll begin to see, you know, as we start to learn more about Zoma, buffing and debuffing is a huge theme for this unit. And I think that it could have some interesting interactions that we'll talk a little bit more once we get into the skills overview. Now, in terms of counter abilities for this unit, you know, we have 2 pretty good options here. You know, his main job is going to give him a counter dispel, you know, just like we've seen on Sodali. And this has an above average chance of proccing off at 30%, and it has a super long 5 range on it, which is really, really nice. Now the other nice option for him here is this counter cure that he's going to pick up from Devout, and that's going to lean more heavily into the sustain factor of this unit. Of course, this doesn't have quite as nice of a chance of proccing off at just 20%, but when it does proc off, you know, it is hugely impactful, and especially if you're able to build up some amount of healing power on this unit. I think in most cases I would probably opt for that dispel effect, but you know, if you have other sources of dispel already on your team, you know, that may not be as valuable, and in that case you could look towards this cure one instead. Alright, let's take a look at Zoma's skills here next, and we're going to start off with his buffs. His self buff is going to provide him a 3-turn, 40% magic, and 20 accuracy, while at the same time it's adding an effect to his attacks, which will dispel both shell and haste from your target. So I do really like that this adds some additional debuffing capability, you know, for his first couple of attacks in battle, you know, on top of the nice buffs that it's giving. His party buff is here next, and that is going to provide him a 3-hit 35% all damage barrier, while at the same time it's going to give him and his allies an additional 20% HP. And again, we're adding some passive debuff capability here with this skill, and this time it's going to himself and the party. And it's going to reduce the bravery of your targets by 20. So against physical damage dealers, you know, this is actually going to reduce their damage output by approximately 15% from the calculations that I've done, which I think is pretty nice added utility. And I do really like this theme of buffing and debuffing that we're looking at here so far in the kit. And it is one of the main reasons why I like that Emerald's Echo passive on him, because not only are his buffs going to be extended an additional turn, but any debuffs that he applies are also going to be extended an additional turn. So any of these 3-turn style buffs and debuffs are going to 4 turns, which, it does present a nice additional value for them. All right, let's move into Zoma's attacks here next. And his first attack is a line AoE. It has a range 4 with a range height of 1. It has a low 121% mod and a 25% chance to sleep your targets. So this one is pretty cool. The effect is probably more interesting, I'd say, for manual play. Only because in auto, we're generally only breaking out these low AP skills to finish off a unit, or when we're very low on AP in the battle. His second attack here is bringing a large diamond AoE. We're getting up to a total range of 5 and a range height of 3. Big modifier on this one at that 220% damage, and it's bringing 2 effects post damage. A 25% chance to frostbite, really on brand I'd say for the ice element these days. They really have been building up their roster of units that are bringing that ailment. The second effect goes very, very nicely with that ailment though, and that's because it's dropping the target's AP by a flat 25. That is definitely on the higher end of flat AP breaks that we've been seeing in the game. And with a large area of effect, this makes it a very compelling skill. It is definitely his highest damage skill as well with that large modifier. So he definitely will be looking to break this skill out pretty often. Again though, those effects just go so nicely together. If you happen to land that frostbite as well, that is just going to cripple any physical unit. Because not only are they going to lose that flat 25 AP right off the bat, that frostbite, when their turn comes around, is going to then drain their AP before they're able to act as well. So you can tack another 15 to 20 AP right on top of that. Remember that frostbite does overwrite AP restore effects as well, so even something like bells wouldn't save them in that case. So this is a very solid skill here for Zoma, and I do like it quite a bit. The one knock that I have on this skill is that it is balanced by sort of a longer cast speed with that reduced 200 casting speed. And like many magic attacks out there, it is reflectable as well. Now his third attack here will be his best single target option. We have a range of 5, a range height of 1. This one is actually non-elemental damage and it carries a 200% modifier. Again, we're having 2 effects here prior to the damage. We're going to break spirit by 30, and then post damage we're going to be absorbing 30% of the damage done. This is definitely very handy that this is a non-elemental skill. In our current age of high penetrations in the game, one of the best ways to counter a strong damage dealer has been to build up your elemental resistance. So this will be handy for Zoma if an opponent is using a fire team to counter him, including a high elemental resist unit such as King Mont. And because it's also breaking the spirit of the target as well, it should do very nice damage, even against a fire element. The other really nice thing about this attack is that it is non-reflectable as well, and it is actually the only non-reflectable skill that he has, outside of his limit burst here in the main kit. Alright, moving on to his fourth skill, and this is another AoE option for him. This one has a range 3 with a +1 on the cross AoE. We have a range height of 1 again with a +1 on the Arid effect. This time we have a medium 165 mod, and notably this is a 3-hit chain attack. Now one footnote that some people may not know, magical attacks like this one do not chain on the damage type. They only chain on element only. So they're actually not picking up as many chain modifiers as other damage types do. At the end of the day though, any chain attack will be picking up additional damage, and this one actually acts as a pseudo barrier break for him as well with those 3 hits. Now this does bring a debuff post damage as well, and that's going to give him a 25% chance to slow any targets that this one hits. So definitely not a reliable chance to slow here, but him being a high faith unit, if you're able to land this on other high faith units, that is actually going to be more of a coin flip at that point. And slow definitely can be very impactful in the battle, as we talked about recently with Summer Jaden. Alright, last but not least, we have his Limit Burst here, and this one is going to seal the counter abilities of the targets. It has an area of effect 38% magic resistance and peril as well prior to the damage. And I do actually believe that this may be a first here. I cannot think of any other unit that has this kind of magic resistance and peril on an area of effect, especially with that larger 38% potency. So I actually think this is going to be really good for a couple of reasons. Not only can this not be reflex or magic guarded because we seal the counters prior to the damage on it is also going to be very high with that Imperil coming in as well. But this actually does give him a very nice synergy angle to be used outside of his own ice element. Perhaps paired with something like a water mage, for example, to help guard against any counter element pick. And when he uses this limit burst, it's actually going to amplify their damage as well, which could be a very, very nice combination. And so sort of summing all of this up here, all of these attacks here in the kit, including the limit burst, are bringing some sort of debuff tied into them. You can add even more debuffing layered on top of that if you're factoring in his self-buffs as well. So again, I think because of that, there's just so much potential value to be found in that Emerald Echo passive that we looked at, and certainly more than I think we've ever seen before on any previous unit. Alright, let's quickly look at Zoma's subjobs here next. His main job is actually bringing a couple of nice abilities here, and I do think that this is one that I would be looking to use in many cases, and that's because it actually has a healing skill here. It is a Curata equivalent, in its potency and range, but this one is actually an instant cast ability, which is very, very helpful. As we've seen so far throughout his kit, he doesn't actually have an innate cast reduction available to him, so this one being instant just makes it that much more viable and useful for him. Now the second skill here is a 3x3 area of effect, very similar to Energy Buster. We have a 185% mod, and this one is actually bringing two nice debuffs on it as well. It's going to reduce the movement of the targets by 1, and it has a 25% chance to immobilize on it as well. This one does have a quicker 360 cast speed, so this is a 3-tick spell innately. You would need a 280 skill activation decrease to make this any faster, which makes the Ice Magic Up Vision card that came alongside Velas a perfect fit for this unit. Even if you equip that one in the secondary slot, you will be getting the 80 that you need, on top of a Trust Stone passive. Now his second subjob here is the Devout class, and this is one that I normally really like on most units, and I still really do like it here in this case as well. Notably though, he does not get the Law of Invigoration skill, which is an instant cast heal, similar to the one that we were just talking about, only that it's bringing some buffing utility on top. I do actually think that is one of my favorite skills, that the Devout class has access to, so him unfortunately not having that I think makes this less of a draw for me. It does have a couple of other nice things here though, including Teachings of Ice, which is a nice way to buff up the ice damage of your party and also increase the debuff resistance as well. At the end of the day though, I think that I would prefer Zoma to be using those buffs that we were looking at in the main kit. I think overall they just really tie nicely into what he's trying to do as a unit, so I think that this would be more of a niche play, I think, for me in most circumstances. Now the last job that he gets here is Green Mage, and this one actually did get upgraded recently on the Japanese side. I have posted here what I think are the main highlights of this job. I do like the support options and capability that this brings, particularly the Vitalize, which has been increased to a 40% agility, and that now is roughly equivalent to Haste, which is a 42% speed increase. And remember that this will stack along with Haste, so you can picture pairing Zoma here with a unit like Velas, who brings that Haste effect, and the speed of your units is just going to be through the roof, so I do really like that combination as well. Alright, on to our future considerations section, and alongside Zoma there is a new Dragon Quest Vision card released. And this one is another job-focused vision card, and this one will work on jobs that have bows, axes, gloves, or fists. So there definitely are some interesting job combinations that you could come up with there, I think, even from within Zoma's own element. And I think, in the early goings here, I think that has been the strongest parties that I've been able to put together. We have stats and a bestowed ability here that will be suitable for a magic unit like Zoma to wear it. I do actually really like that 32 luck there in the base stats, and that will actually bump his accuracy up quite nicely. And we are picking up 10 area resist here as well, so nice overall package here in terms of the base stats and bestowed. Now, as we saw with the job vision card that was released just after you all, we are picking up some increased effectiveness on the party buffs here. And on an equivalent mono element card, we might be expecting to see something like 20 slash resist and then maybe somewhere between like 10 and 13 magic attack paired with it. So you can actually see both of those values are increased here, which I think is actually one of the more interesting developments with these new vision cards. Now notably, this is the 15% agility card as well. Those cards are always much coveted, among the player base. That effect actually is not getting increased here. We are staying at that 15% value, but with the overall speed of the units, being so high these days, it is probably for the best. We will have a new glove weapon that will debut alongside Zoma, and I have this one roughly translated as the Cobalt Glove, and I think it is actually a pretty good option for him. Remember, he didn't have any innate magic resistance penetration, so he's going to be able to pick up 20% here from that passive. I am a little bit curious, what are they doing with these glove weapons in the game, and why are they limiting them just to a single passive? That is something that we actually saw with Summer Helena as well, and her spirit penetration gloves that came along with her. That said, I have highlighted the magic version here, just because I think that maybe the aim version would be a bit wasted in Zoma's case. And that's due to Zoma's subpar accuracy. I think that you really will need a heavy accuracy item, something like the Alex ring, to really pump up his accuracy as high as you can. And the aim version on this one, just doesn't really pump it up enough, I think, to be all that useful. This one has sort of moderate to decent base stats on it. You can see that 160 magic value, that's fine. But, I think, as I said before, the main draw to this one is getting him some magic resistance penetration. So, that would be why I would use this one. Okay, flashing over to our 2022 timeline, and when can we actually expect to see these units if they are to be released on global? And this is what we're currently forecasting for the schedule, and with the way I see things lining up right now, and with the other known commodities that are kind of coming along the way, the Dragon Quest collaboration, we would be looking at sometime around Christmas for that release. And I do envision a pretty high probability that this collaboration would probably get pushed into the new year and into 2023. And that's just because we are going to be looking at a global Christmas event, right in or around the time where they would be on the schedule. It is also possible that they could look to condense some of these releases here along the way and then bring them in just before the Christmas event. Might be a good way to actually drain our Visior before going into that. So, I think either way is possible. We'll just have to sort of see, what Gumi decides to do. In terms of the ice element though, if you've been following the channel here in the last couple of months, we have been talking about ice quite a bit. Lots of new ice is coming into the game, and that's really going to begin in global for us here in a couple of weeks with Snow and Agrius during the 2.5-year anniversary. And then maybe 6 weeks or so later, we would be looking at Alaya. And if you are interested in picking up Zoma, I would definitely recommend in picking up either one or both of those frontline ice units that we just mentioned. I would say Alaya is more optional in that case. Her job actually doesn't fit into the vision card that we were just looking at, and actually Eliza's does. So, if you have Eliza, you could actually pair her with him, and that would actually work out pretty well. Now on the flip side for the ice elements, we do have Delita coming, of course, with the return of Final Fantasy Tactics. I do think that he will be much improved as a unit, but definitely not a game changer whatsoever for Fire PvP. Interestingly enough though, within the same Dragon Quest collaboration, we are going to be getting a new Fire unit, and that is Sorrow the Manslayer from Dragon Quest IV, and I will actually be covering him in my next preview, so stay tuned for that one. Now I definitely have been expecting the other shoe to drop for the Fire element for some time now, and I've been kind of speculating on here in this section of the videos for quite some time. So far, it just hasn't come to fruition, even on the JP side, I think they're still kind of waiting on something over there as well. And I think it's really needed to sort of balance out this massive ice meta that is kind of coming on the imminent horizon. So because of that, I am still expecting that, exactly when it's going to happen, we can't say, but I think there is still a pretty good chance that we do see something during this 2.5-year anniversary, maybe as a global exclusive unit. So here is a mock build that I've put together for Zoma, and today's build is going to be an anti-Glaciella setup. She is a very strong upcoming wind unit. I did actually cover her here on the channel, so if you haven't seen that video, I will put a link to that one above. Now in terms of Glaciella, how exactly are we going to defend against her? Well, for one, we are bringing in ice elements, which naturally does counter wind. However, wind is just so powerful now that even that has not been a given for us recently. And with Glaciella coming in, she is just going to amp the power of wind even further. So you just need a little bit more than just being an ice element to walk in there and face roll those opponents. Now in terms of Glaciella, she does bring a wind in peril along with her. She does heavy pierce damage, which is generally hard to defend against. And she does have her own 50% all damage barrier, which really improves her survivability. So I definitely will be looking to build up both my wind and pierce resistance. And that's going to be on top of all the normal things that I like to bring in terms of area resist and single target resistance. So I will be pairing Zoma here with Snow and Eliza. And at least in terms of this combination of units here, this is something that I've seen pretty popular so far on the Japanese side. Snow is that frontline presence, and he actually gets benefit from Zoma's new vision card as well. And this guy just works so nicely, and Snow just works so nicely in terms of getting way out in front of the team and protecting them from any area damage, just because he's distanced himself so much from them. That is definitely one of the main reasons why I like that main job sub here on Zoma. Remember, it has that instant healing capability, so, as Zoma is making his approach towards the enemy, he may be able to get off a heal or two onto Snow and help him keep topped off. Now, for the equipment in this build, I am using the new glove for that magic res penetration, as we talked about. I have a new ribbon accessory, which will be coming from the raid for the Dragon Quest event. and that's going to actually give him some pierce resist as well as some other nice things on top of it. For the TMR, I am using that Reuse TMR for the re-raise effect, and I just think that that combination with his passive is so very strong and does make this unit very, very difficult to deal with. Now for an Esper, I always love Shiva for an anti-wind pick, especially when we're talking wind pierce damage. For the vision cards here, I have area resist and single target resist covered by Mana Pool and Dark Odin. The agility is going to be covered by Zoma's new card. And I have HP, wind resistance, and pierce resistance all in my sub slots. Now moving down into the trust stones for the builds, on the left side I have slash, pierce, and wind resistance. I have element debuff resistance to help guard against Glaciella's Imperil. And then I'm adding in here the usual HP and luck. Moving over to the right side, I have that skill activation reduction as well as the healing power. I do actually think that this is one of the best ones you can use for him. Not only is it going to help out his instant cures, but it will also impact his drain attack and his auto heal back ability. So you're definitely getting a lot of value out of healing power with this unit. And I think that you could even opt to combine this with a defense or spirit set to get even more healing power on him. Now aside from that, I do have the usual modifier increases here in terms of ice attack, magic attack, and etc. Now I have tied today's build into HP and agility sets. I definitely always like HP for the additional elemental resistance, especially in these anti-element builds. And I did opt for the agility set, which will just put him a shy short of 100 agility here, coming in at 99. For more of a general build, if you were maybe more worried about evade units getting to you, you definitely are going to want to invest in luck and accuracy sets here for the trust stones. And then definitely an Alex ring, and you're probably going to be wanting some accuracy vision cards in the party there as well. Because as you can see there in the stats, his accuracy value coming in at 266, he will struggle mightily, hitting any sort of evade unit in this particular build. I would like to see the agility a little bit higher here. There are some other things that you could opt to do there. You could look to bring in maybe another agility card in the sub slot, or you could look to trade out that pierce resistant accessory for maybe something like a pod 153 or something similar. You will have very nice mitigation here for the purpose of our build today, which is to counter Flagbearer Glaciella. He's going to be sitting at 35 pierce resistance, and he's going to be above 50% wind resistance here as well. So he's going to hold up very, very nicely, especially when you consider some of the healing that he has access to. And so that is the anti-wind, anti-Glaciella builds. If you're interested in checking out this one a little bit closer, as always, I will put a link to this one in the description below. So what is the verdict on this unit? This is a high sustain unit through a combination of various tools like auto heals, barriers, drain attacks, and bravery debuffs. He will be very difficult to take down if you're not prepared for him or are unable to chain multiple attacks against him in succession. On top of that sustain factor, he does have very potent magical attacks on top of it, including a 220% modifier with a large area of effect. He's also joining a small cast alongside 2B, 9S, and Ibarra as a non-human type unit, which does have PvP benefits as well in terms of being immune to effects like Human Killer, which is seen on the most widely used PvP espers. That said, he can and will be exposed. Notably, he is lacking when it comes to magic res penetration, as we talked about earlier. And that is definitely a concern for him because that is his only damage type, within his kit. The Imperil on his Limit Burst helps him out quite a bit in that department, but once that is gone, all bets are off. His accuracy is also coming in at below average level, and he does not have any 100% hits there to back him up. So if he's not heavily invested into accuracy, evade units are definitely going to have a field day against him. Despite those shortcomings, I do believe that this is actually one of the better 90 cost units that I've seen, this year. And even more so, if you have access to Reuse TMR. And I think that his unique blend of skills and varied debuff options, does give the ice element a brand new look that we haven't really seen before. Alright guys, so that is my first look into Zoma. Now one thing that I actually didn't say in the review, but I think is actually going to be a pretty big selling point for this unit, is that his in-game sprite is absolutely massive. He towers above any and all other units in the game. I'll actually throw up a clip here so you can check that out real quick. You can see here that he just towers over snow. So that is actually another thing that we haven't seen before, and I think that is actually super cool too. I do actually hope that we see more size variation, amongst the various units that are released in the future. Pretty cool overall unit here in Zoma. You know, I'm always here for more ice units. It's definitely one of my favorite elements, and we've certainly been seeing a lot of that on the Japanese side. And maybe Zoma here will be the final stamp on that ice meta, you know, at least for this year. You know, like I said, we have seen quite a few units and vision cards released for the elements. But, you know, I guess we'll just have to sort of wait and see what happens over the next couple of months here. So I'm going to hand it over to you guys now. You know, tell me in the comments, you know, what do you think of this unit? Did you play Dragon Quest III? And, you know, are you excited for the collaboration with this game series? And are you excited to see more villains available in the gacha? You know, probably the first that we've seen since Golbez. Aside from that, you know, what did you actually think of the capabilities and potential meta impact that he has? I'm looking forward to hearing all of your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video today, you know, hit that like button. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you like what I'm doing here on the channel, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. And that's really all I have to say for today. So as always, stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.